Before Barbershop hit theaters, nobody at MGM expected it to change anything. It was a $12 million ensemble comedy about a South Side Chicago barbershop. No franchise, no explosions, no guaranteed stars. Then it opened #1, sparked a national controversy, got Rosa Parks' attorney on the phone, and launched careers nobody saw coming. These are 18 strange facts about Barbershop that will completely change how you see this film. And one jaw-dropping bonus at the end that absolutely nobody talks about. Speed up with me, because the list starts now. Fact 18. Real South Side storefront. Most Hollywood productions that claim to be set in a specific city build a replica in a Los Angeles studio lot and hope nobody notices. Barbershop refused. The production went to Chicago, found an actual former laundromat at 79th Street and Exchange Avenue in the South Chicago community area, gutted it, and built a barbershop interior inside the existing neighborhood space. They duplicated that interior on a soundstage for scheduling flexibility. But principal photography ran through the Chicago winter of 2001, and the team chose to stay in the real neighborhood rather than retreat to a controlled environment. What a real location gives you doesn't appear on screen as a labeled detail. It shows up as texture, the particular quality of light coming through those windows, the relationship between the shop and the street moving past the glass outside. You can't manufacture that in a studio. The barbershop in this film feels like a real place because it was built inside one, and the audience felt the difference even when they couldn't name it. Fact 17. A month in barber college. Before a single scene rolled, every cast member spent a full month at a barber college learning to actually cut hair. Not a 2-day crash course. The complete curriculum. Tools, techniques, posture, the specific rhythm of a working barber who has managed thousands of conversations while keeping the scissors moving. Troy Garity was the only person who arrived with any prior experience. For everyone else, including Ice Cube and Cedric the Entertainer, it was a skill built from zero in 30 days. The reasoning was simple. A barbershop film where actors can't convincingly work around a client is a film that falls apart every time you look at their hands. You can't patch physical credibility in post. By the time filming began, the cast could do the job their characters were supposed to have spent years doing. That foundation made the improvisation, the physicality, and the ease between performers in every shop scene possible. Comfort with work you've actually learned looks completely different from comfort you're pretending to have. Fact 16. Son of Jane Fonda, Isaac Rosenberg. The barbershop's sole white barber, whose presence generates both friction and one of the film's most carefully considered conversations about cultural identity, is played by Troy Garity. Troy Garity is the son of Jane Fonda and political activist Tom Hayden. He was born in 1973 and made a deliberate early career choice. He took his maternal grandmother's maiden name rather than trading on either parent's famous surname. He wanted to build a career on his own terms, without that lineage functioning as either a selling point or a target. The character he plays sits inside a genuinely complicated dynamic. Isaac isn't a tourist in a black South Side shop. He's a man who grew up immersed in that culture and is forced to defend that claim to people with entirely reasonable grounds for skepticism. The film doesn't resolve that tension. It sits with the discomfort. That conversation was given to the son of Jane Fonda to have on screen, and the fit is exact. Fact 15. The Soul Food Blueprint. George Tillman Jr. didn't invent the barbershop approach from scratch. He had already built and tested the blueprint with Soul Food in 1997, a Chicago family story grounded in the same philosophy. Find a real community, build the central location inside an actual neighborhood space, and let the authenticity of the environment do what no production design budget can replicate. Soul Food cost $7 million and grossed $43 million worldwide. The formula was confirmed. When Barbershop came to him, the approach was already established. The $12 million budget was nearly double Soul Food's, and the return was proportionately larger, $77 million worldwide. Two Southside Chicago stories, two productions built on the conviction that the community being depicted deserved to have its own streets, its own light, and its own texture on screen. Tillman grew up in Chicago. He knew that an audience from the South Side will know immediately if what they're watching is the real thing, and the box office proved him right twice. Fact 14. Two careers launched at once. Michael Ealy had appeared in small roles in Kissing Jessica Stein in 2001 and Bad Company in 2002 before Barbershop. Neither gave him any meaningful screen visibility. The role of Ricky Nash, the young barber with a criminal past trying to stay clean, was the first time an audience had a real reason to know his name. Eve arrived from a completely different direction. She had already sold millions of records and was one of the most recognizable names in hip-hop before this film started shooting. Barbershop was her feature film debut. Ealy went on to Barbershop 2, Takers, For Colored Hired Girls, and 2 decades of significant work. Eve built a television career that included her own sitcom and a main cast role on ABC's Queens. Both careers trace back to a $12 million film shot in a former laundromat in South Chicago in the winter of 2001. Neither of them is why the film works. They're what the film made possible. If you are enjoying this, take 2 seconds and leave a like. Subscribe if you want more videos like this. That support really motivates my work and helps a lot with bringing more content. Fact 13. Ice Cube's creative grip. Ice Cube wasn't just the lead actor on Barbershop. He was a producer, and that title wasn't ceremonial. He had significant creative control over the project from pre-production through post, and he used it. The most direct example, he personally pushed for Cedric the Entertainer to be cast as Eddie Walker after watching what Cedric brought to the original Kings of Comedy. That call changed the entire trajectory of the film, as we'll get to at the very end of this video. But Cube's influence went beyond casting. He pushed for the film to be made on location in Chicago and had strong opinions about which characters felt authentic. There's a safer, more generic version of Barbershop that gets made without that producer involvement. That film doesn't open #1. That film doesn't spark a national conversation. This one did. Fact 12. Urban World premiere. Barbershop didn't walk cold into its wide theatrical release on September 13, 2002. It had already been screened publicly, and it had already made an impression. The film had its public premiere at the Urban World Film Festival in New York on August 10, 2002, a full 34 days before its national opening. And it didn't just screen there. It closed the festival. Urban World, founded in 1997, is one of the most credible multicultural film festivals in the country. Closing the festival is a statement. The curators considered this the film the audience should leave thinking about. That reception fed directly into the promotional campaign that preceded wide release. MGM had not originally projected Barbershop as a major commercial performer. The festival momentum helped change that calculation, and the film arrived at its wide release with earned momentum behind it. Fact 11. Rosa Parks responded. Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton weren't the only people who made their feelings known. Rosa Parks was 89 years old when Barbershop was released. She responded anyway. Her attorney, Gregory Reed, issued a formal statement on her behalf. Parks was deeply saddened and offended by the film's characterization of her role in the civil rights movement. Specifically, the suggestion that her act of resistance was unremarkable and that she had been elevated above other women who made the same choice before her. The Eddie monologue is actually making a more complicated argument than the protest suggested, that the mythology around a single act has obscured the broader community of resistance it came from. But that's an extremely difficult position to land with precision inside a comedic monologue, and Eddie loses control of how it reads almost immediately. Parks died in October 2005 at 92. The film that caused her attorney to issue a formal statement is still in circulation, and the controversy is now a permanent part of its history. Fact 10. 6 times the budget. The numbers from Barbershop's opening weekend were not what anyone at MGM had projected. No major action sequences, no franchise recognition, no built-in sequel audience. The film grossed $77 million worldwide against a $12 million production budget, more than 6 times what it cost to make, with those returns arriving in week 1. By the time the Jackson and Sharpton controversy erupted publicly, Barbershop had already proven itself at the box office. The protest added weeks of free national media coverage to a film that was already performing strongly. The sequel was green-lit before the theatrical run ended. Tim Story didn't return for Barbershop 2. Kevin Rodney Sullivan directed with the original cast intact. The franchise continued, a 3rd film in 2016, a spin-off, a television series, all of it built on the foundation a $12 million film laid in September 2002. Before we keep going, subscribe if you haven't yet. Drop a comment telling me which movie or show you want me to cover next with strange behind-the-scenes facts. I read every single one. Fact 9. 1 previous film. Tim Story had exactly 1 previous feature credit before Barbershop. Do X was a 1998 independent production that gave him directing experience without giving him any industry profile. He wasn't a filmmaker studios were tracking. And then they handed him a $12 million ensemble comedy with Ice Cube and Cedric the Entertainer. It opened #1. It grossed $77 million. What followed was a career Barbershop made possible, and nothing before it could have predicted. Fantastic Four in 2005, an $87 million Marvel property, was handed to a director whose only mainstream credit was a Barbershop comedy. Ride Along in 2014 paired Kevin Hart and Ice Cube and grossed $154 million worldwide. Barbershop. The next cut in 2016 brought Story back to the franchise he launched. The line from a former laundromat in South Chicago to a Marvel film runs directly through a $12 million production that proved a director nobody knew could open number 1. Fact 8. 2 comedians just getting started. The supporting cast included 2 South Side Chicago comedians at the very beginning of careers that would take them far beyond this single film. Durrell Babbs, known as DeRay Davis, appears in the film in a supporting role. The following year, he appeared in Kanye West's Through the Wire video and began building a profile that eventually included 21 Jump Street, a main cast role on Wild 'N Out, and a significant part in John Singleton's Snowfall. Dion Cole also appears in the film. He went on to recurring roles on Conan, main cast work on Blackish and Grownish, and multiple NAACP Image Award nominations. Neither of them is the reason anyone watches Barbershop for the first time. Both of them are reasons people notice things. On rewatches they completely missed before. The film cast its community, and the community had people in it who were going to matter. That turns out to be one of the best decisions the production ever made, though it was probably less of a decision than a reflection of who was actually in those South Side rooms. Fact 7. Founded in 1958. The founding date of Calvin's grandfather's barbershop isn't background detail, it's an argument. The year 1958 arrives in Eddie's speech as the anchor of his case for what Calvin is throwing away. And 1958 is not a randomly chosen year. It's 2 years after the Montgomery bus boycott, and 1 year after the Civil Rights Act of 1957, the first federal civil rights legislation since Reconstruction. A black-owned business opening on the South Side of Chicago in 1958 was a claim of permanence, an act of building something designed to survive pressures that actively wanted it gone. Here's the detail that makes the whole film more interesting once you see it. The film's most controversial scene involves Eddie dismissing Rosa Parks while simultaneously defending a barbershop founded the year after her most celebrated act. The film is placing its argument about black community institutions directly inside the history it appears to be questioning. That's not an accident. That's a movie that knows exactly what it's doing, even when it looks like it doesn't. Fact 6. The spin-off star didn't exist in the original Beauty Shop. The 2005 spin-off, built entirely around Queen Latifah's character Gina, is a spin-off of a character who doesn't appear in Barbershop. Gina was introduced in Barbershop 2, back in business in 2004. She appears for the first time in the second film. The audience responded strongly enough that producers moved immediately. Billy Woodruff directed Beauty Shop, and it reached theaters in March 2005, just over a year after Barbershop 2 was released. A standalone film built on a character introduced in a sequel became one of the faster franchise extensions in early 2000s black cinema. The pipeline from sequel introduction to standalone film was compressed to under 14 months. That speed says something about the health of the franchise by 2004. The original was strong enough to generate a sequel, and the sequel was strong enough to introduce a character so compelling she warranted her own film before the sequel's theatrical run had fully cleared. Quick reminder to subscribe if you are enjoying these revelations, and tell me in the comments, do you know any strange fact about this movie that I didn't mention? Let's build the list together. Fact 5. The Showtime series rewrote everything. When Barbershop the series launched on Showtime in fall 2005, it arrived with changes the show did not address. Ice Cube did not return. Omar Gooding stepped into Calvin's role, and the series moved forward without acknowledging the substitution. Dinka was renamed Yina, after the production recognized Dinka wasn't a typical Nigerian name. Isaac's last name changed from Rosenberg to Bryce. Ricky Nash, Michael Ealy's character, the breakout role from the original, was removed entirely and replaced with a more hardened ex-con named Rodal. None of it was explained. The series simply arrived with a new configuration and proceeded as if continuity was optional. Today, quietly swapping your lead actor and renaming characters would generate its own national conversation. In 2005, it mostly produced confused viewers who kept watching anyway. The Barbershop brand was strong enough to survive an identity transplant. That says something about what the original film built, even if the series treated that foundation with remarkable casualness. Fact 4. Jackson, Sharpton, and the DVD They Couldn't Stop. The film had been in theaters 2 weeks when the controversy arrived. Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton went public with their objections to Eddie's monologue. The specific lines were direct. Rosa Parks didn't do anything but sit down on a bus. Martin Luther King was unfaithful. O.J. Simpson was guilty. Rodney King deserved the beating. And the line that gave the protest its most quoted headline, "Fuck Jesse Jackson." Jackson and Sharpton contacted MGM directly. Their demand was specific: edit those scenes out before the DVD release in January 2003. MGM refused. The DVD was released on schedule in January 2003 with every controversial line fully intact. The filmmaker's defense was clear. The other barbers in the scene push back against Eddie's statements throughout the monologue. Jimmy challenges him directly. The film doesn't endorse what Eddie says. It presents it as the kind of conversation that actually happens in a barbershop and lets the room respond. That framing didn't satisfy Jackson and Sharpton. It satisfied MGM. And the DVD hit shelves on time. Fact 3. Written from life, shot where it happened. Mark Brown didn't research the world he was writing about for Barbershop. He lived it. He wrote the original story from his own experience growing up in Chicago. And the barbershop culture he was depicting wasn't something he'd studied from the outside. It was something he understood from years of accumulated presence. George Tillman Jr. had grown up in Chicago as well. When he came on board as producer, he insisted the film be made in the city where the story was set, not reconstructed somewhere else. Variety's review described Barbershop as a cross between Car Wash and Do the Right Thing, a workplace ensemble comedy that uses the physical space of the shop to examine the community around it. That comparison works because the community in the film is real. The South Side of Chicago isn't a backdrop here. It's the subject. The decision to film there rather than simulate it elsewhere is what makes the difference between those two things visible on screen. And once you know it, you can't unsee it. Fact 2. The soundtrack hit on its own. The film's commercial success didn't stop at the box office. The Barbershop soundtrack, released on September 17, 2002, days after the film opened, debuted at number 4 on the Billboard 200 and reached number 2 on the top R&B and hip-hop albums chart. For a soundtrack tied to a $12 million ensemble comedy with no guaranteed stars, that was genuinely unexpected. The music was showing up in places the film couldn't reach, reinforcing the project's identity across a commercial landscape where a strong soundtrack meaningfully extends a film's cultural footprint. The combined performance of the film and soundtrack in those opening weeks is why the franchise moved so fast. When a $12 million film opens number 1 and its soundtrack debuts top 5 simultaneously, studios read that as a brand with real traction. The sequel was being discussed before the opening weekend numbers were fully counted, almost at the end, and the best is still coming. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next, and drop your city or country in the comments. I want to see how far this video is reaching. Fact 1. The shop scenes were choreographed. The barbershop interior set had 8 barber stations, a waiting area, and a full ensemble cast that needed to be in motion simultaneously through most of the film. Director Tim Story and his team mapped each barbershop scene in detail, tracking which barber was at which station at any given moment, how movement through the space tracked against conversations happening across it, and how to make a busy shop feel naturally chaotic without becoming visually incoherent. The physical training the cast received at Barber College became the foundation of this choreography, because every actor could actually cut hair. The blocking kept everyone in authentic motion throughout scenes. No one was freezing in the background waiting for their line. The shop always looks alive because the people in it always look like they're actually working. That's not accidental. Get this kind of ensemble spatial choreography wrong, and scenes in crowded spaces feel staged and artificial. Get it right, and the room feels like it existed before the camera arrived. In this film, it does. Bonus: Cedric wasn't the plan. The Eddie Walker role, the old barber whose monologue about Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, and Jesse Jackson turned a modestly budgeted comedy into a national news story, was not originally written for Cedric the Entertainer. It was written for a veteran character actor, an older man, a straightforward elder statesman type, warmth without heat, wisdom without edge, safe, respectable, entirely harmless. Ice Cube watched that version of the role on paper and said no. He pushed specifically for Cedric after watching the original Kings of Comedy, the specific ability to deliver sharp social commentary that made audiences laugh and think simultaneously without making anything feel pre-approved or comfortable. Cedric was 37 when this film was shot. The performance that generated a statement from Rosa Parks' attorney that prompted Jackson and Sharpton to contact MGM that made this film impossible to ignore was delivered by a comedian who hadn't yet turned 40, playing a role written for someone completely different. Ice Cube made the call. It was right, and the rest of that history you already know. And those were 18 strange facts about Barbershop. People remember this as a fun ensemble comedy from the early 2000s. And it is that, but it's also a film that understood its community deeply enough to put a real story storefront in front of the camera, train its cast for a month, and let its most controversial scenes stand intact, even when major public figures demanded cuts. It deserves more credit than it usually gets. If you made it this far, leave a like, subscribe, and comment which fact surprised you the most. And don't forget to suggest another movie that deserves a list of strange facts. See you in the next video.